Alright, so we made it past the basic selection tools. Let's go over some of the other basics now. For example, if we select an object that we want to delete, you can either press the delete key or the X key, and that will delete it. And if we didn't want to do that, we did by mistake, you can press Control and Z to undo it, and you can press Control, Shift, and Z to redo something. Alright, now let's go over adding in new objects. For that, we'll press Shift and A for the Add menu, and we have a list of all the different types of objects we can add in. Let's start by adding in a mesh monkey head. So it adds in the monkey head wherever the 3D cursor is, which is this red and white and black target thing right there. Now we can move the cursor by holding Shift and right-clicking and dragging to place it anywhere in the 3D view. Now if I press Shift and A again and add in another monkey head, it adds it in right where that 3D cursor is. Now the 3D cursor has a lot more functions, and we'll get into that in the future chapters, but for this chapter you just need to remember that that's where new objects are added in. And now we're going to move on to the most important basic operations, like for example pressing G to grab something and move it. You can right click to cancel or press escape. And then there's also S for scaling, and then R for rotation. Now rotating will happen at whatever view you're in, but you can also press R twice to give you something called trackball rotation, where you can rotate it basically on every axis. Now you can also constrain all of these transformations on any given axis. Let me get rid of the monkey head. We don't need two of those. And I'll select this. Now if I press G to move it, and if I only want to move it on the X axis, while I'm moving it, I can press the X key. And same thing with Y and Z. And that works with scaling and rotation too. I can press S and then X, and it scales it just on the X axis instead of every axis. And if I press R and then Z, it'll rotate only on the Z axis. And actually, instead of pressing the axis key, you can also middle click while dragging. So for example, if I press G to move this, and then I middle click while dragging left, it'll constrain that movement to the X axis. So that's even faster than using the hotkeys. And alternatively, you can exclude a single axis by pressing Shift and that axis. For example, if I wanted to scale this monkey head on the X and Y axis, but not on the Z axis, I can press S to scale it, and then press Shift and Z, and it'll lock the Z axis and just scale on the X and the Y. And that really comes in handy sometimes. Now you can type in values for the transformation as well instead of just eyeing it up. For example, if I press R and then Z, if I want to rotate that perfectly 90 degrees, I can hold the Control key for snapping, and as you can see in the top left, the rotation value is going to give me 5-degree increments. Or I can type in -90, and it gives me a perfect -90-degree turn, and then I'll press Enter. Now to activate the transformation tools, I recommend using the hotkeys I just showed you, but you can also activate those tools in the tool menu over here. For example, if we activate Move, we can then just left click and drag and it moves the selection around. And it also activates the Move gizmo right here, which shows you the different axes available. And if you click on one of those arrows and move it, you can see we'll move the object along that particular axis. And same thing with rotation. It gives you a rotation gizmo there, and scaling as well. But again, I'd recommend using the hotkeys in order to develop a faster workflow. But one thing that doesn't have a hotkey is if we left click on the scale menu there and go down to scale cage, it gives us this cool scaling cage right here with all these different control points that will scale your object in different ways depending on which point you select. So that's pretty cool. So let me reset that back to scale, and I'll reset the active tool to select box, which is default. Now in this example, I'll show you an extra transformation option called proportional editing. You can activate this with the options up here. So let me click on the left icon there, which activates proportional editing. And you can also press the O key, which is the hotkey to activate and deactivate the tool. Now when this is enabled, any objects or any transformation of one object will affect nearby objects. For example, with this middle cube selected, if I press G and then Z to move this up and down on the Z axis, you can see there's a circle going around the object's origin point. This is called the fall-off circle, and any object whose origin point falls within this fall-off circle will be affected by the transformation, as you can see. Now you can change the size of the fall-off circle by using the scroll wheel on the mouse. So if you scroll down, it makes it larger. If you scroll up, it makes it smaller. Now they call it a fall-off circle because the influence falls off the further the objects are from the center of the circle, as you can see. And if we go into front view, we can see what that fall-off looks like exactly. So by default, it's set to a smooth fall off, as you can see right here, which gives us this curvature going up and then going down. me undo that, and we can set this to sphere as well, which gives us more of a bulge like that, a spherical shape. And pretty much whatever shape you see in the icons here is the shape you're going to get from your fall off. You can even completely randomize it as well, and it gives you more of a random effect. And that pretty much does it for proportional editing. This works in edit mode as well, and I find it's a lot more useful in edit mode, but we'll go over that at a different time. And so that about does it for that. Let me reset this back to the default smooth, and I will deactivate proportional editing. Now in this example, we're going to check out some object information. So let me press the N key for the right side toolbar, and we have some transformation information here, including location, rotation, scale, and dimensions. Now the object right here, you can see that its origin point is at the center of the world, so you can see that its location is going to be 0, 0, and 0. Using these fields right here, we can actually move things around. We can use this for animation purposes as well. We can also lock some of these values. So for example, if we're pretending this is a robot arm and this is the elbow, if I select the end of the arm here, and from this view, if I press R to rotate it along the elbow joint, you can see it kind of goes bonkers because it's rotating on multiple axes. So let me undo that, and I'm going to lock the x-axis and lock the z-axis so that it can only rotate on the y-axis now. So if I press R now, you can see it rotates along that joint as intended, and the y-axis is the only one that changed because we locked the others. So those are very handy options right there. Now we have scale and dimensions down here. Now what is the difference between the two? Well, dimensions gives you the actual global dimensions of the object, whereas scale is just how much bigger or smaller than the original scale of the object has become. So for example, if I add in a monkey head, you can see it always gets added in at a scale of 1 by 1 by 1. That's the original scale of the object. If I press S to scale it up, you can see the scale becomes as large as I just scaled it up. These are not the dimensions, however. This is just how much larger it is than the original size of the object. The difference between the two might seem confusing at first, but the scale option is useful for different reasons that we're going to get into more throughout the course as needed. So you don't really have to worry too much about that right now. But the dimensions part is pretty simple and straightforward. No matter what size your object is, the dimensions here just tell you its exact measurements in the world. Alright, now let's move on to the operator menu, and this is a menu that pops up anytime you perform an operation. For example, if we press R to rotate the cube and drop it there, you can see a menu pops up down here. And if we expand this, you can see different options we have for the operation that we just carried out. So for example, we can change the orientation to global, and now we're rotating on the global z-axis, and we can change the angle value right here to get something very precise. And pretty much any operation you do will have options in the operator menu down here. So let me collapse this back down there until we need it again. And I'm going to show you how to clear rotation, scale, and location to basically reset your object. So the cube right here, you can see we moved it from its original position, we rotated it, and we scaled it. We can actually clear all these to reset it back to its original form. So if we press Alt and R, it's going to clear the rotation and reset that back to what it was originally. And then we can press Alt and S to reset the scale, and then Alt and G to reset the location. And finally, you can hide objects using the H key. So if something is obstructing your view, you can simply select it and then press H to hide it. And then when you want to unhide everything, you can press Alt and H. And alternatively, if you want to hide everything except one object, you can simply select that object or multiple objects and then press Shift and H, and it will hide all the unselected objects. And that's it. Now we're going to go over all these tools a lot more throughout the course, and everything's going to be easier to understand when we actually use these tools. Right now I just wanted to give you a primer of the basic tools available in object mode. And a lot of these tools work the same way in other modes as well, such as edit mode, and we'll be using a lot of these tools in these modes throughout the course. But that's going to do it for this lecture, so I'll see you in the next one.